Good morning, everybody. Clive Smallman here. Could you just give me an indication that you can hear me okay and that you can see the first screen of the presentation? That would be really good. That's great. I've actually got about 12 registered, and there are one or two who are joining us now, and will probably join us later. So welcome to everybody. Some simple rules. If you've got a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of water, that's good. Make sure you've got a means of taking notes and try and switch your phone off, or at least put it to silent, because we know everybody's busy just at the moment. What are we going to talk about this morning? Well, I'll put a bit of context around the workshop, what I'm talking about, why it's important and what I hope you can achieve out of it. And then the content around the 6 steps that I've talked about in the title here. And then in closing, we're just going to let you know briefly about a new mentoring program I've got and about my LinkedIn workshop series, which is free on transforming leaders. You can ask questions in the chat box all the way through, and there'll be time at the end, and I'll break at certain points if I see a good question popping up. Please don't be shy. The workshop is being recorded, and there'll be a copy on my website sometime over the next couple of days, and I'll email you to let you know that that's there. And if you want a copy of the slides, I'll let you know how we'll do that at the end. So that's just about it, really. So I'll make a start. The first thing to notice is that how many steps are there in the first picture? Anybody noticed? How many steps in the first picture? Go on, don't be shy. Okay, there are 7 steps in the first picture. And the reason I've done that is mainly because I couldn't find one with 6, a picture with 6 steps in with somebody on it, but also there is a 7th step, which is the one that comes before going forward transformation. That's deciding that you need to make some form of transformation in your leadership style, your business, or your life. Why look at this? So really, just to put this in a bit of context, the world's always changing. That's just life. It's all got a bit harder recently, as we know. We've had a singular event, probably somewhere in China, leading to a catastrophic pandemic that we've got at the moment. This is classic complexity theory. A portion of bat stew consumed by one person leads to the statistics from this morning from the World Health Organization: 133,611 new cases, 9,129,146 confirmed cases, and 473,797 dead, I'm afraid. So that is complexity theory. One person does something and there's a whole bunch of effects as a result. So what it's become is a singularity. It's a tipping point with health, political, economic, social, and technological impacts, because we're seeing technology is being used to adapt to the situation. So it's driving change it had to, but it's not always a singularity that does this, but this is a particularly strong case. The question is, what do we do? And in business in particular, which is one of the reasons you're here, what do we do? It is a peculiar type of disruption, thank goodness, 1 in 100 years, as we say, but it's a disruption nevertheless. And disruptions tend to create this chart that I'm looking at here. And really, in terms of in where we're at, normality has been going along here. We hit a disruption like this, and we're located here. And for a lot of people, we'll just drop off and begin to go down through profit, through break even, onto loss. With planning and good fortune, we won't go into insolvency, one would hope, although that's not worked out for Virgin clearly, although they look like they're going to recover. And we'll begin to turn out, and the aspiration is to move forward into a new normality across continuity and recovery. The pivot is the most overused word in the English language just at the moment, and it's really the inflection point at which you decide you're going to have to do something different. Now, for a lot of people, they will pivot out and they'll still go down through profit, through continuity, but they'll start to turn out and start to rebuild their business or lives or their leadership style. A very fortunate few, and I've had a few conversations over the past few weeks when I've been doing business development work and talking with other people. A very fortunate few people have never been busier. One group, unfortunately, is insolvency experts who have been quite busy in some cases. Other people who are extremely busy, but always busy at this time of year, of course, are accountants. So it's not always the case. And the question you need to ask of yourself is, where are you on this critical curve? What are you going to do as a result? Where do you actually position yourself? What is it that you're going to do? Sorry. Now, it's important because a lot of people, some of us included, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of challenges on us just at the moment. That's a normal part of business life to an extent, but it's been made worse by the virus that we're in at the moment. Now, in disruptions and in normal times, we all face crucial choices in work, business, and in life. And there are common pain points. People lose their jobs or are at risk of losing their jobs. Many people really long to develop their own businesses. Some want a new job to reinforce their current position, or they want to fast track their careers. They want to correct performance shortfalls in some cases. That's a bit of a difficult one for people to miss. Or the other one, of course, is, as some of you will know, change projects commonly fail, unfortunately, for all sorts of reasons. But whoever you are, they're looking for the means to distinctly impact themselves, other people, organisations, and perhaps the wider community through transforming their leadership, transforming the leadership that they report to, their business, or indeed some form of transformation in life. If you're one of those people, or you know those people, and you're seeking to improve employment prospects, develop a strategy to create, transform, or grow a business, to change your job, reinforce your current position, or fast track your career, improve your performance, or look for better change management, it's easy. Yeah, no, it isn't easy. Pivoting of any form is a tough gig, shifting even more so, and that's what I came up with this chart the other day. It's based around innovation, but it applies to people's work and people's leadership style equally. And these here are really who your customers are. And then the other things are all the other things that make up your business model, or the way that you operate in your own personal business model. And it's easy to sit here in terms of just chugging along. But if you want to get a bit more radical, you've got to start to think about who you're working with in terms of customers, what your business model's actually doing. But if you really want to change, if you really want to shift it and really get radical, then you've got to shift. And the question you've got to ask is where you want to be. It's feasible and possible with intensive work, with guidance and accountability. It doesn't matter where you get the guidance from, but you need to ask questions. You can shift, you can pivot now. And I've certainly been going through that for the last 2 to 3 years myself. The other thing to say is, there's an old saying, I am a one for cliches, unfortunately, but the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. So my view when I talk with mentoring clients or potential mentoring clients is, how about starting your own forest would be something worth thinking of. Now, this is my version of several different ideas that I've picked up over the years, and these are the people who influenced me. Linda Grattan in particular, working with Andrew Scott in this case. Work life getting longer. So we've got to start to think about what we're going to do. I'm 60 next year. 60 this year, actually, thinking about it. No, next year. And I've got to think about where I'm going and what I'm doing. Because life is getting longer and I hope I'm going to live a little longer. Blue ocean strategy is something that intrigues me because it turns the conceit of you need to keep worrying about markets and the competition, and it just says, no, let's worry about adding value for you and your customers. It's a much better way of working with strategy. Change by design says, yeah, but you've got to engage with people to work out what they want, and it complements blue ocean strategy, and the complementing of that comes down to business model generation, which is Yves Pigneur and Alex Osterwalder's work as well. Those two combined there. And business model generation also goes when you're looking at personal transformation to what's called Business Model U, which was Tim Clark's adaptation of business model generation. Very useful book. The other influence on me is Kaplan and Norton when they talk about how you actually map strategy out, how can you actually look at tracking what you do and how you're going to do it. And then, of course, there's the issue of how on earth do you scale it. There's no better person to talk on that than Verne Harnish, who's been very successful in that space and created the idea of the Gazelle company, which is a rapid growth company. And of course, I suspect one of you at least in the audience knows that Matt Church is a heavy influence on me. And he's talked about how we need to evolve leadership over the next decade. So what I've done is taken ideas from these ideas from other places and pulled them in to come up with this approach. Now, it is cliche and it's a little bit kitsch, the picture, but transforming leaders, transforming businesses and transforming life it really is about releasing your inner hero, the best version of you that you can actually get to. And what we're looking for is this magic of transformation that some people will sell heavily, that's going to improve employment prospects, improve career positioning, improve planning your own business, improve changing leadership, bringing general improvement in your performance. But my point genuinely is that transforming leaders isn't magical, because magic is illusion. And I reckon that these are the 6 steps that you need to transform different elements of your life, your leadership, your business, or your life indeed. Understanding your business, mapping change, understanding the market you want to work in, creating stakeholder value, identifying constraints and opportunities, and then creating impact. And all the time asking the 6 crucial questions: what, how, where, who, why, when. So that's the approach that I'm going to talk about in just a moment or two. It's all a question of where you want to swim. Do you want to take on the competitive red ocean? Are you just going to keep butting heads with the established people that are already out there, conventional business competition? Or do you want to be in a blue ocean where your focus is on creating value for your business, yourself and your customers, and letting the other people just fight it out? That's the question that you've got to ask. And as I walk through the thinking over the next sort of 15, 20 minutes that I'm going to, I want you to think about these 3 things. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And what do you need to do to get there? So there's 3 things to think about for you. Everybody okay? Everybody follow me so far? We're all good. No questions yet, but I'm sure they'll come up in a moment or two. Understanding your business. Now, I'm getting on a bit now, getting towards 60. And so my MBA was done a long time ago, and I've worked in business for 30 years now. And at the time when I started out, understanding your business was about things like pest analysis, competitive analysis, core competencies, SWOT analysis and so on, what used to be called the design school approach. And they're all good, and we still use some of those tools. But design science and blue ocean strategy, that's Tim Brown's work I referenced earlier, and Morborn and Kim's work has changed that through the work of Osterwalder and Pinure, which is what the business model canvas is about. What business has become is about really understanding your business model. And there's, you work through, you can look this chart up online, it's quite straightforward to work to. And you start off looking at your customer segments and what the value propositions are, the bundle of goods and services that you offer to them. You look at how you manage your customer relationships and through what channels do you communicate and work with them. Excuse me. And that will allow you to consider what your revenue streams are. When you understand that, then you can start to think about what your key activities are in what it is you do, what your key resources are to actually enable those activities, as well as your key partners. That gives you your cost structure. And I refer to these as cost drivers and revenue dynamics because that's what you're trying to do. Now, what happens when you change your business model is entirely up to you, but there have been some spectacular areas where changing the business model has resulted in a real boon to the company. For example, PayPal was originally envisaged as a cryptography company, and then later as a means of transmitting money through what were then called, quaintly, personal digital assistants, otherwise known as iPads and smartphones. But after several years of trial and error, and also getting past some fraud that nearly destroyed them, Elon Musk and his colleagues found its sweet spot and became the online payment system that we know, which is subsequently being sold, and Musk has moved on to greater and better things. But that's what happens. Now, your shift or your pivot of your business model doesn't need to be that big, but it can promote great things. And there's a certain way of doing it, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment or two. Once you've worked out what it is you need to do, and I'll talk about how you do that in a moment, is once you understand your model and you begin to map changes that create stakeholder value, and as I say, back to that in a moment, you need to map the changes in terms of lag and lead metrics across 4 different elements of business. For me, this is the way I approach it. And basically, you look at the financial side of things, your customers, your processes or activities, and your learning or growth. And this is just a really simple model. In the case of a publicly listed company, you're maximizing shareholder value. You might change that to maximizing stakeholder value, whoever owns your business or your life. You then look at the customer angle. You want to exceed customer expectations, add great value, and inspire loyalty, so you actually keep your customers. In terms of business activities or processes, you need good partnerships, good effectiveness and efficiency, and high quality value propositions, value products. And in terms of learning and growth, you've got to have good quality staff, employees, and you've got to have good leadership. And you need to build lag measures of that. That's measures of where you come from. That's things like profitability. It's things like revenue. But you also need lead measures. You need to understand where it is you're going. So you're looking at how your growth, how your leads are coming in, for example. So you need to start to think about that. That gives you a strategy map. Now, do these work? Yes, they do. I used to work in the university sector, and I know that Leeds University in the UK, which is a very important university in the UK situation, it's a bit similar to UNSW. They charted their strategic journey using strategy maps. That's how the Vice Chancellor and the people drove the transformation of the university, and it's a very successful one indeed. So from mapping change, we then move to understanding your market. Now, we talk about market understanding, but a more current way of thinking about this, a better way of thinking about this, is that, in case you haven't noticed, and most people have, is that markets consist of people. So the single most important fundamental exercise in transforming a business or better understanding your leadership, or indeed it extends out into life, is to develop an empathy map of what your customers, the people who you serve, think and feel. And this was created a few years back. And it'll help you develop greater impact, which we'll come back to in just a moment. I'm just going to work through this. There are key questions you ask. Who you are empathizing with, understand who your audience is. What is it they need to do? What do they need from you, or what can you give them? What do they see out there in the market at the moment? What solutions do they see? What are they saying about those types of solutions? And what do they actually do to solve their own problems? And what are they listening to? So what are the sort of sales lines are being sold to them? And from there, what do they think and feel? What are their pains? Where do they want to see gains? And what are other emotions and feeling? Decision making, while it's presented in many places as sort of logical, data-driven, isn't it wonderful? Decision making is emotional. At some point, decision making is subjective. And we all make decisions differently based on the state of our head and the state of the mental model that we're working to. And we've all got a different mental model. It doesn't matter. At the end of this seminar, I could ask you, what are the main points you got out of it? And the chances are I'd have 5 different views. And that's the thing about why we need to understand customer empathy pretty deeply to understand where we can make the greatest impact. These are used widely. I've seen them used all over the place. The place that I've seen used them a heck of a lot is IKEA. And if you go into any IKEA store, people like me who like to go through very quickly get very frustrated because you have to wind this very strange path through the store. But it's thought through from a design perspective because they're trying to invoke an empathic response from people as they walk through the store. They're trying to get people's emotions to engage. Isn't that a nice bedroom setting? Isn't that a wonderful kitchen setting? Isn't that a wonderful lounge? Yes, I need that there. So empathy maps are absolutely crucial when we're approaching customers. In terms of creating stakeholder value, this is what we need to think about. And this is where we begin to redesign the different elements of the business model canvas. I'll just flip back to it now. We begin to tinker with these different elements through thinking about them in different ways, through asking these questions. Which of those elements, which of those building blocks should be raised well above what's gone on in the industry? This is where it's still connecting back. Which of those elements, which of the building blocks should be reduced well below the industry standard? Which factors has the industry competed on for a long time? Which factors should be eliminated? And what sort of things do you think you need to create that the industry has never offered? So you're trying to move the value curve of your business or your organization in a different direction. This is the idea of moving to a different ocean. And if of the 4 factors, which is Kim and Morborn's model, the 2 which are, I think, are particularly crucial are these 2 here. And we apply those to the different building blocks within the model here. But what we've got to understand is that the different elements of the model, these different elements of the model interact. Our customer segments are affected by the channels. Our customer segments are affected by customer relationships. So if we try and change elements of how we manage customer relationships, we need to understand how that impacts our customer segments, because this isn't just, these are all connected. I get very frustrated with modeling because models are always quite limiting. I always want 3 dimensions. It'd be nice if you could fold this map up to show where things connect to each other. But nevertheless, as we can see, I just can illustrate that. We can see that, sorry, I'll just get my flow back. In asking those questions, we're going to change different parts of the model. A great example from Australia is Casella Winery, and some of you may have seen this wine called Yellowtail. And although it's sold in Australia, it was being sold into the US. In 2001, they entered the market with some trepidation, and they'd expected to sell about 25,000 cases. In the end, they sold 9 times that amount. So by the end of 2005, they were at 25 million cases. And that is because they looked at what value they could offer the market over and above what was being offered by Californian, French and Italian brands, simply by asking these questions. And if you have a look at Blue Ocean Strategy, you'll see there's many other examples from aircraft. And they don't have to be huge corporates. Casella was not a huge corporate winery to start with. It is now, it's clearly grown. But by asking for very simple questions and looking at the changes that makes to the business model, they've completely revolutionized the way their business operates. Now, what's important coming out of that is not to multitask as far as possible. And this is one of the things, and I relearned this from he's a terrific guy, and I'll talk about it in a moment. A guy called David Hodes reminded me of this. It's really important when we do these things to focus on one thing, if at all possible, that is compromising or promises improved performance. And this is what's called the theory of constraints. A guy called Goldratt created it a few years back. And the idea is to identify constraints and opportunities, look and see how you can exploit them. When you've got a constraint or an opportunity that you're working with, everything else comes second. So you've got to work to that. And what that'll do is enable you to elevate your performance based on that constraint or opportunity. Then you move to the next one. So the idea is to work through the things that can make a difference to your business model, one step at a time, to see where you go with it. Moving lots of things at once can cause a lot of issues. Now, I talked about David Hodes a moment ago. He runs a group called Ensemble Consulting, and they work in all sorts of industries. And he uses the theory of constraints to solve productivity problems. They got called in by a bank, a big one, and they got a real problem with a project. They'd got 8 weeks to a project deadline, and they had to solve a whole heap of problems. And what happened was they used existing technology to implement a work management system. They restructured the culture by focusing on a singular purpose, one thing, and they increased productivity as a result by 100% and got the per defect days time down and saved about £5 million per month. So that's what you get by focusing in using that particular approach to identifying constraints or opportunities. And the other thing that we need to understand is how we actually create impact. And we create impact by focusing in on the value proposition, or I like to call it the value provided to your different customers. And the value provided is about what services you provide, what creates gain, what relieves pain, and then that matches against your customer empathy map, where you look at their gains, pains, and needs. The best example, although it's an unpopular one with some people, is Uber. And they get widely criticized for a whole heap of reasons. But its value proposition is unmatched. The smartest way to get around. They've solved everything that is bad about getting a traditional taxi. The service is, generally speaking, superior. So one tap and the car comes to you. Your driver knows where they're going. Payment is cashless. You haven't got to mess around anymore. You haven't even got to get a credit card out, usually. And that directly contrasts with the typical experience. If you've got Uber, it contrasts with the typical experience of getting a taxi. No phone calls. Have you ever rung a taxi call centre? Dispatchers, they really are not having a good time, most of them. No painful conversations trying to explain where you're going to a cabbie, although that never happens in London, not most of the time. No worrying about change, no worrying about having enough notes to pay. It's fast and efficient. And all sorts of aspirational messaging around that. And that is a great value. Now, they've got some problems they've got to solve with employment relations and one or two other things, but it is a terrific value proposition on paper. Those were the 6 steps I just talked about. We need not to lose sight that always in life you should be asking these questions at the start of every day. What, how, where, who, why, when. What have I got to do? How am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? Who am I going to do it with? Why do I need to do it? Needs to be asked. You need to understand why you're doing something. What's the purpose of doing it? And when, because you've got to get your timing sorted out in a lot of cases. So those are the questions. They actually apply to, although it's a very nice graphical presentation, I think, but those apply to all of the steps. It's just that it's a nice, convenient way of presenting them within the graphic that I've got there. So those are the 6 steps for transformation: understanding your business, mapping change, understanding the market, creating stakeholder value, identifying constraints and opportunities, and creating impact. And again, ask in each of those steps what, how, where, who, why, and when. So I'm going to move to closing now, and then I'll because there are so few of us, I'll open the microphones and we'll have a conversation if you wish to. Very briefly, I have a mentoring program that runs. It's called the Transforming Leaders Program. It's on my webpage. You can have a look at it. It's a fast track to a fully accredited MBA in 12 months from a British university, and you get another award as well in terms of transformational leadership. And you can track that down on my webpage if you so wish to. This is the first workshop in a Transforming Leaders workshop series, where I'll cover off 7 more topics around transformational leadership, and you're welcome to join. They're all up on my LinkedIn page. You go and have a look at them. And as always, a little bit of encouragement for you. Transformation's hard. And yes, and I've gone through this process, you'll feel frightened. Occasionally you'll get messed up and knocked down. And occasionally I've wanted to stop, and you may want to stop as well. But it is the best work you'll ever do. And Robin Sharma's a writer that I admire, and I've read a couple of his books now. And it's well worth contemplating his thoughts on that. So that's all for the formal part of what I was going to talk about. What I'll do now is I'll end the show and come back to a full picture of me. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. I'm back. So, does anybody, I'm going to open some microphones up. Let me just remember how I do that. Attendees. So if you want to unmute your microphones, you're welcome to. And any questions?
No questions, Clive, but it was a very good presentation. I loved it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir.
Hi, Clive. Katie from Sydney here. How are you?
Hi, Katie. How are you going?
I'm very well, thank you. Apologies for coming late, but I'm all healthy, so that's good.
Good. The more the merrier. The more the merrier.
Yes, absolutely. Look, Clive, as you know, and what I've spoken to you about via LinkedIn is I'm actually going on my own leadership journey now, which is an incredible experience. It's quite confronting and rewarding, and all of the things that you just iterated. Yeah, then which is why I was quite interested in this. My question to you is, what I'm finding about the leadership journey is that the ability to mobilize others to be the best that they can be, you know, there is a difference that I'm finding. You know, you've got your tangible managerial aspects, you know, of leadership processes and systems and efficiencies, but then you've also got this intangible aspect, this cultural
Yes.
yeah, this cultural vibe that you really need to exude as a leader. And there are a lot of intangible aspects that are much more complex than managerial aspects. So I guess my question is, what is the difference to you and between managing and leading, and how can you merge the two together to work synergistically?
I was actually writing about this afternoon in another sort of part of my practice.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is that I like Bill Walsh's biography, The Score Takes Care of Itself, and he kind of encapsulates many of the things that I think you've just talked about. And the way that you can imagine working in an American football team, very macho, lots of machismo, very macho culture, very male, very masculine culture, so a tough environment to coach in. But what Bill did, and this is, his book's tremendous, always worth a read. His book. He's sadly no longer with us. He left us, unfortunately. But and what his view is that what you do is you set expectations. You tell people what you want, what your expectations of performance are. You give them the right environment to work in, and then you hold them accountable. So you're having frequent conversation. The other guidance I always give people is the work of Susan Scott on tough conversations.
Yeah.
That and that's what it's about. And the conversation I was having, believe it or not, was about the fact that some people don't want to work from home, but other people do. And some managers are struggling with having people working from home. And the reason that occurs is that the managers who don't want people to work at home, if they can, some jobs don't permit it, but it's all about trust. And trust comes out of clearly communicating your expectations. So you set this is what I expect of you. And then to an extent, you've got to learn. I used to have a guy used to work for me who nobody else could manage. And somebody said, how do you manage him? I said, I tell him what I want and then I'll let him get on with it.
And you trust him to do his thing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what I used to do was to reel him in once a week and say, okay, what have you been up to? And slowly but surely, I got him to move some of his bad habits out and bring more good habits in. So you've got to give people sufficient, it's not enough rope to hang themselves.
Yeah, understood.
Give people sufficient space to actually take some risks and try and do things effectively. And my dear wife, for example, is now working at home, works for a university. She's hugely comfortable here because her boss trusts her and he knows that she's going to do the work that she needs to. The other side of it is this. The other side is that we still pay people by the hour. So your salary is based on the hours that you work. Now, in some it's different if you do some work that involves sales, but we don't pay people by result necessarily. Results is looking at personal performance, not financial performance. So So the answer is you need to set your expectations of people. You need to tell them what you want. You need to give them the tools to do the job, and then you've got to let them go. They will make mistakes.
Hmm.
In your eyes, it might not be mistakes in theirs.
Of course.
But they will make errors. I had a guy doing a job for me, and he took off with completely the wrong lead magnet the other week. And I picked it up and said, hold on a minute, and we fixed it. And you just accept it and move on. But that's the trick that you've got to. That's the trick. That's the side of things that you've got to manage, Katie. Is as I say, tell them what you want, what your expectations are. Tell them what result you expect. And I mentioned, I think before you came into the room, you've got to have lead measures as well as lag measures. So it's no good just measuring what's gone. You've got to set them targets for what's to come.
Okay. Yep.
You want to look that up. Go and look. The place to look that up is the 4 Disciplines of Execution. Is the book.
Yep. I'm writing all of this down.
And they talk about lead and lag measures.
Excellent.
And particularly important, I think. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, excellent. That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do we have any more for any more? Okay, that's cool. I'll call a halt because I know that we all have plenty to do. Thank you so much for joining me. Greatly appreciated. I'll let you all know when the video is up. It has to download from Zoom first, and then I do a little bit of editing just to make it look a bit tidier and make sure the graphics are okay. And I'll let you know when that is. And please, if you'd like to join me again next week, we'll have a workshop on strategic thinking. So please join me then. And thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Clive.